The name is Dr. Richard Smith, and he served as editor of British Medical Journal until 2004. And he's famously stated that the medical research and scientific publishing has become deeply corrupted. He argued that the current system incentivizes fraud, which institutional misconduct reaching a scale where one might need to assume a study is fraudulent until proven otherwise. So that's not me saying this. This is the former editor of the British Medical Journal basically saying that science is bought and paid for. I met an organic farmer who, believe it or not, used to work for Monsanto. And so he told me a story how they were invited down to the Monsanto headquarters in St. Louis. There's this big office tower there. And he said that 2/3 of the office tower, the top two-thirds of the floors, were dedicated to marketing to farmers. Something snapped in him, and he realized, well, that's wrong. What are we trying to do? Why is so much spent on marketing? What's wrong here? In other parts of India, there's quite high rate. A lot of that was linked to GMO cotton. They promised the farmers higher yields, better economics. After the first few years, the yields dropped precipitously, and farmers got into financial trouble. Literally, many of them committed by drinking the Roundup. Whether you're for or against immigration, because there's tremendous social upheaval happening with ICE. This has divided Americans. Many Americans are against ICE. They think ICE is heavy-handed. Other Americans say it's necessary. There's too many illegal immigrants in the U.S. People say these are not illegal immigrants. They're undocumented labor or undocumented immigrants. What I like to point out to everyone is you get rid of the subsidy regime, or you reform the subsidy regime, and you will have a lot less of this immigration issue. People that are coming to the States, especially from Latin America, they're not coming to the States because they want to. They're coming to the States because of desperate economic time in their countries. And part of that is from the U.S. subsidies.
My guest today is Jason Freeman, a Canadian entrepreneur with 3 decades of experience building farmer-owned food businesses at the intersection of organic agriculture, cooperative economics, and sustainable supply chains. He founded BioHemp in 1994, one of the earliest organic hemp food ventures in North America, before going on to build Farmer Directive Cooperative into a multi-million-dollar operation supplying major retailers across the United States and Canada. He has navigated commodity market collapse, corporate acquisition, and cooperative failure firsthand. Today, he runs Farmer Direct Organic and is actively working on technology solutions to connect farmers directly to consumers. Few people understand the structural economics of North American agriculture the way Jason does. Jason, welcome to our podcast. It's nice to have you, and looking forward to learn more about the entire farmer world with you today.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Abdul. Appreciate it.
Let's actually just rewind a little before I have a bunch of questions. But before I actually dive deep into that, I really want you to take through your experience into farming and everything that you'd like to share in brief.
Where would you like me to start? How far back?
How did you actually get into farming? What made you get into farming? Like, were your family into farming? Because mostly the kids of the farmer happens to, most likely, to be farmers. So
yeah, well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think that's kind of where the disconnect is between urban consumers and the farm gate, and why the farm, well, not just North America, but around the world, often are economically stressed. And so I'm not from a farm. The first time I stepped on a farm when I was 29 years old, believe it or not. But what I was an organic consumer since about 1994. I started eating organic food as I began to research the health effects and the environmental effects of synthetic chemicals, nitrogen or synthetic fertilizers, and pesticides. And I got into hemp because me and my friends were involved in forestry activism in the late 80s, early 1990s in British Columbia. And this culminated with some of my friends spending time in jail for blockading a logging road. The good news is that the the old growth watershed that they're protecting, actually, through the blockading and putting up platforms and trees and things like that. What ended up happening with that particular watershed is that the indigenous people of that area, the government and the forestry company, actually came together and came up with a sustainable plan for that forest. So it's still standing today. It's a beautiful, absolutely gorgeous watershed, and so that's good news. But my friend told me when this all happened that you can make paper out of hemp. And so I went down that road investigating that, and that's how I got into agriculture essentially. First lobbying the federal government to legalize industrial hemp, and then working with some of the farmers that were lobbying with us on legalization. So I realized I didn't have the money to build a hemp pulp and paper mill. There's all kinds of technical issues when you're switching from wood fiber to agricultural fibers. People are doing that. There's a lot of bamboo toilet paper, for example, and things like that. A little bit of hemp out there. So that's changing slowly. But so I decided to get into the farming aspect through organic hemp seed foods. And so that was, between 1994 and 1998. In 1998, I launched the organic hemp seed food company, BioHemp, and I sold that in 2001. By that time, I'd moved out to Saskatchewan because all our farmers and processors were in Saskatchewan. And after I sold BioHemp, the farmers that were growing the organic hemp seed for us said that they had other organic crops to sell. And by that time, I was a hardcore organic consumer. So lentils, peas, beans, wheat, oats, things like that, all certified organic. So I said to them, if you form a cooperative, I'll manage your sales, marketing, and logistics for a fixed percentage of sale. And that's how Farmer Direct Co-op was formed in 2002. And Farmer Direct Co-op's main business was selling truckloads of certified organic crops, lentils, for example, to lentil soup manufacturers. And so, that went reasonably well from 2002 to 2009. And then the financial crisis happened, or the real estate bubble in the U.S. And when that happened, commodity markets, both organic and conventional, just essentially evaporated. Food manufacturers weren't making any purchases. They wanted just-in-time shipments. The reason is because they didn't know what was happening with their inventory, if it was going to be purchased, as retailers pulled back from keeping much inventory and really pushing for a just-in-time situation. So we decided that in order to stabilize the business of the co-op, we'd have to find more secure, higher margin markets. And we figured that the best way to do that was to launch the Farmer Direct Co-op brand. So we did that. We didn't really have much money for product development, so we just decided that what we could do is put all our grains in 25-pound bags for retailer bulk bins. And so in 2011, we launched the Farmer Direct Co-op brand. We did some innovation. Also, we became the first brand that was domestic fair trade certified. So the first national brand that was domestic fair trade certified. And your viewers probably are familiar with fair trade. Fair trade is mostly from the global south, where you have bananas, sugar, things like that, chocolate, coffee. But I, as an organic consumer, always ask the question, well, why isn't all organic food fair also? And then you go into it and you learn that, well, it isn't, because there's still significant labor exploitation issues in organic agriculture, and even in North America. Well, I shouldn't say even in North America. Sometimes, especially in North America, depending on the farms that they come from, especially as organics became more corporate. So we searched for a certifier and a standard that we felt wasn't fair washing. Some of these corporate fair trade certifications, they don't really enforce their standards, and there's lots of issues with compliance, and they're oftentimes just more marketing than actually verifiable standard. So we found a group called the Agricultural Justice Project, which was a domestic fair trade certification that was owned and managed by farmers and farm workers. So the very people that fair trade is supposed to benefit. And it was a really good standard. So we got certified by them, and then we launched the Farmer Direct Co-op brand as 100% farmer owned, 100% organic, because all we did was organic. And to this day, Farmer Direct Organic just does organic. We don't do natural foods or conventional foods. We don't blend natural or conventional grains in with our products. And 100% domestic fair trade. So it's 100% farmer owned, 100% organic, and 100% domestic fair trade. So that was, a really solid attribute package. And so Whole Foods came knocking. Actually said, "We love what you guys are doing." And that was in 2013. And we figured it'd be, a few pallets of business a month. It ended up being 5 to 7 truckloads a month. And so that's how the co-op really, basically took off. And the brand did really well in Whole Foods Market. In 2016, I left the co-op after 14 years. And 2 years after I left, the co-op came back to me and asked me if I'd buy the brand from them, because they're fine. It's a difficult endeavor to manage a retail brand. So I accepted it. I bought the brand back from the farmers, and that's how we launched Farmer Direct Organic.
Perfect. I actually noticed a few things when you just took back and introduced yourself, wherein you talked about how you entered you entered farming with because of biohemp and with biohemp, and then moved to commodity pulses and all of that, and about organic market farming, right? So I will just touch base on this the other two, which is pulses, right? And then organic farming. When you say organic farming, the majority of the North Americans, the farmers especially, right, they use something called Monsanto. So Monsanto, the GMO, modified seeds, they happen to pollination. The soil gets the other soils, even if they are not using any product from Monsanto, even those soils actually get tampered in some way. Am I so far being correct over there with Monsanto and about?
Yeah. So essentially, in the mid 90s, Monsanto introduced Roundup Ready corn and soy. So essentially, it's plants that are genetically modified to be able to handle in-field spraying of glyphosate, Roundup.
So how do you ensure your products and even the other farmers who are actually claiming organic products, they are eventually organic and they are not how do you ensure that soil process? Can you just take us through that?
So it's a real issue in organics. There's been a lot of fraud, offshore and domestic, where people have, sold conventional, even GMO grain as organic. Now that, how do we address that? We're tested, clean, certified. So all the crops that we sell are tested for glyphosate and 200 other pesticide residues. So that's the first way that we ensure organic integrity. The second way to ensure organic integrity is that we're a 100% organic company. We don't buy conventional grain. So there's no chance of commingling or tampering, for example. That's one way. Another way is, or the third way is, all our crops are traceable back to the family farm that grew them. So, 95% of the crops that we purchase, I have a long-standing relationship with the farmer or the farmers. So I know these farmers. I've been to their farms. I know how they farm. I know their commitment to organic, and have a history of buying products from them. And we test those products. Like I said, we test every product for pesticide residue. What you'll find in organics is there is residue there. For glyphosate, the tolerance or the most of the glyphosate testing certifications test down to 10 parts per billion. We actually test lower than that. But what we're guaranteeing is not a product which is free from pesticide residue. That's
again, you can't do much because again it's pollination that's happening. The bees. So
mostly it's drift spray from neighbors' farms. Now, what you can test for is if it's direct application or if it was residue, and you can just tell by the levels. So direct application, you're looking at about 250 parts per billion or more, and that's it's not an organic crop. It's being sprayed directly. Anything under 40, so anything under 250 billion, 250 parts per billion. What am I trying to say here? Our tolerance is we won't accept anything over 40. Okay, so even if it's say 80, it's probably not direct application. However, this year, for example, the most we've had is 20 parts per billion in the crops that we've tested. Most of our crops are under 10 parts per billion. But we're a farmer-centric organization. What we're doing is connecting consumers directly with farms, but also educating them about what it's like to be an organic farmer. And one of the things that organic farmers have to deal with is the residue from their neighbors. So we didn't want a testing certification that would penalize the farmers. What we wanted is a testing certification that informed the public of, okay, this is not direct spray, this is residue. So for us, it's not about penalizing the farmers. It's about being transparent with the public and also maintaining integrity in our organic supply chain. So my point being is, we have had crops that have tested, over 100 parts per billion, which we've rejected, right? But but this year, for example, we had some crops that tested about 20 parts per billion. Well, it's clearly residue, not direct application. So we're not going to reject that crop because it's still 95% below the USDA allowable limits for organic. And it doesn't penalize the farmer for being a good organic farmer. Right.
Okay.
So I don't know if that makes sense, but so
it does.
Yeah. And we have to be very careful with these testing certifications, because if you start penalizing organic farmers that are doing the right thing, it has the opposite effect of what people want. So
exactly?
So it puts the farmers under economic stress because now they can't sell the crop into our system, even though the crop is grown organically. They did everything right, but it just happens to be, say, 10 parts per billion higher than that arbitrary 10 part per billion level that other testing certifications have. And at the same time, it's way below a lot of the other organic brands that are out there that don't test. So it's really about finding that balance. What we want to happen is that there's more organic acres out there, not less organic acres out there. And in order to do that, we have to have policies that are transparent to the consumer, but at the same time don't penalize the farmer, the organic farmer that's doing everything properly.
that was my exact question, follow-up question that I actually had. So between 1997 and 2013, across 63 countries, there has been 400 documented cases of GMO contamination. So my question is, like,
Okay, so what the GMO contamination? I think you're referring to as cross pollination.
yes.
So the way we deal with that is that we don't grow any crops that are also GMO crops. So, for example, our farmers in Western Canada, we grow a lot of lentils and oats. There are no registered GMO varieties of lentils and oats in the U.S. or anywhere in the world, as far as I know. So you can't have a cross pollination situation. However, there is GMO canola on the Canadian prairies, and a lot of it. Well, that's basically destroyed the organic canola market, or the organic spring canola market. And so what I mean by that is the varieties that are GMO'd are spring canola, not winter canola. So farmers in Ontario, for example, organic farmers, they'll grow winter canola. So they seed it in the fall, and then it comes up in the spring. So it pollinates at a different time than the GMO spring canola. So you don't have the cross pollination event. But as you pointed out, it's basically next to impossible to grow spring canola without getting it cross pollinized on the prairies with I have to, excuse me, I have to be very exacting with my definitions here, right? My vocabulary here. So it's almost next to impossible to grow certified organic spring canola on the prairies and not have it cross pollinized by GMO spring canola.
So why isn't there any international regulatory framework that requires Monsanto and companies like it to compensate neighboring farmers for contamination damage and something of that sort?
So it's interesting that you say that, because there is now precedent in courts going back quite a few years where there is precedent for compensation for farmers that their neighbor has like their pesticide or herbicide has drifted onto their fields. And not just organic farmers, conventional farmers that sued conventional neighbors for pesticide drift. So there is that. So if your neighbor sprays pesticides and it comes over to your crop and it damages your crop, you can go to court to get compensation for that. I don't know of any court that has provided compensation for GMO pollen drift. And so, it's a good question. Why not? There's a farmer named Percy Schmeiser who was a canola seed grower. So just, again, definition, seed is for planting, grain is for processing. So he bred canola seed. I think Monsanto took him to court. He countersued them. This is a long time ago.
I know about that case.
Yeah.
I read during my research. Yeah.
Yeah, and the court kind of found for him, but didn't find for him. So my understanding of is that he didn't win on the point of the GMO cross pollination. Why? That's a good question. I guess the answer is that the GMO ag chemical lobby is an incredibly powerful lobby, and in order to have the courts, fine for something like that, first you have to get legislation, through the government to actually create laws to make GMO cross pollination, essentially, lack of a better term, illegal. So farmers that have the pollination can sue their neighbor or even the chemical companies. It's, but I think what's bringing it down is that on the consumer side, where consumers started to sue first Monsanto, then Bayer Crop Science for glyphosate poisoning, essentially related to cancer. So, and this is a very interesting thing to see how it went down, because ultimately consumers have a lot more power than the organic farming community does. The organic farming community in North America has probably stagnated at about, I think, 5% of acres, or maybe a little less in North America are organic. It's been like that for the past few decades. But consumers, at least in this instance, it seemed to be a lot more powerful and are able to affect change. Because this is costing first Monsanto and Outbear a tremendous amount of money. And even though these companies, as massive as they are, this is hurting them, right? So,
Yeah.
really interesting things going on now. There's technology out there to replace herbicides. I don't know if you've seen the laser weeders, but they're
Well,
companies
yeah.
that are producing weeders through lasers. Absolutely incredible. Computer.
I mean, it eventually looks incredible, but at the same time, I'm John Deere.
Yeah.
Like eventually, that would end up somewhere like that, where you can have the tractors, but again, you can't operate, you can't fix it yourself. You need to really take it to them, and then wait for a few months to actually for them to review like what's actually wrong. We will get to that.
Yeah.
I really have some fantastic stuff to actually discuss, but
Okay.
yeah. Now, you also mentioned that commodity market, like reasonably, it was profitable. And I want to really emphasize on that word reasonably. But on the flip side, it's a world news now that Bill Gates is buying farmlands in acres, right? Like he is one of the biggest farmland owner in the United States. And there's the Resnick family who uses more water than the Californians themselves. So again, there are billionaires from the farming industry. So how do you actually see that? What do you have to say about them and what they know about farming, or that the regular farmers don't? Please educate us.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to verify the stat. I think there's upwards of 1 billion acres of farmland in the U.S. Just give me a second here.
Sure.
Okay, so yeah, it says there's 874 million acres of farmland in the United States, and that fluctuates too, depending on what exactly is being farmed. I've seen stats saying there's more than a million at one time, more than 1 billion acres, but the amount of farms have shrunk, so there's less acres now. Bottom line is it's a lot of acres. So Bill Gates is and his 250,000 acres is really not that much. I don't think that's necessarily the concern. And there's lots of large farms out there that are have that many acres or more, corporate farms. You touched on the water use issues in California. These are deep issues that have structural reasons for them. I want to go back to a comment that you talked about as these commodity markets being profitable, like the GMO commodity markets being profitable. I'd have to disagree. I don't think they're profitable. And why I don't think they're profitable is because they require subsidization to keep going. So the U.S. government subsidizes GMO corn and soy to the tune of billions of dollars a year. You take those subsidies away, and these crops are no longer profitable. So, and then that ties into immigration. What I'd like, especially Americans, to discuss, right, and try to find some common ground is that whether you're for or against immigration, because there's tremendous social upheaval happening with ICE. This has divided Americans. Many Americans are against ICE. They think ICE is heavy-handed. Other Americans say it's necessary. There's too many illegal immigrants in the U.S. People say these are not illegal immigrants. They're undocumented labor or undocumented immigrants. And what I like to point out to everyone is you get rid of the subsidy regime, or you reform the subsidy regime, and you'll have a lot less of this immigration issue. people that are coming to the States, especially from Latin America, they're not coming to the States because they want to. They're coming to the States because of desperate economic times in their countries. And part of that is from the U.S. subsidies. Well, how does, explain further? It just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe some of your viewers are thinking. What the subsidies do is it allows the large corporations like Cargill and the other grain companies to purchase the corn and soy from the farmers under the cost of production, and then they sell that into Latin America and other countries at below the cost of production that the farmers there can produce their crops. So what happens, it puts a tremendous amount of economic pressure on the farms in South America and Central America. Farms go bankrupt, and then you have issue where the farmers go. Where do the farm workers go? Well, they migrate up to the U.S. in the hope of getting jobs because they've been pushed off their land because of the dumping of these commodities. You stop dumping commodities in these countries, and all of a sudden, the farms can be viable, and then they aren't displaced, and they're not coming up to the States looking for work. If that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Similar happened. Yeah. Argentina is one good example of that, right? So when the United States actually started to subsidize milk, the Argentinian that economy, they fully collapsed because their product was majorly run on dairy and beef. I suppose I don't remember this quite well, but it's been quite a few years that I learned about Argentina, how successful of a country they were, and their entire economy, at least a major chunk of economy, relied on dairy products. And when the US subsidized their own dairy market, the demand for Argentinian dairy started to collapse.
Yeah.
And that was so I'm familiar.
So you deal with that subsidy regime, and it goes a long way to dealing with the immigration issue. So I say to Americans, Democrat, Republican, whatever side you're on, okay, just voting for the other guy is not going to do anything. You have serious structural issues that need to be dealt with. Once those are dealt with, then these other issues, these secondary issues, the massive displaced people migrating to the U.S. is, if not totally solved, at least partly solved. How do you do that? That's a good question. How do you address the subsidies? And, I don't have an answer for that other than first people have to educate themselves about it. They have to know that instead of just getting angry at the TV, because that's what they want you to be, angry and divided, is find that common ground with the person on the other aisle, on the other side of the aisle, right? Whether it's Democratic or Republican. I know it's really difficult. People are emotional about this, and I understand why. It's a brutal situation. But that's what corrupt systems do. Corrupt systems, by definition, divide the populace. So the populace has to, rise above that to find the common ground, the structural reasons for these issues, and then deal with the structural issues. And the U.S. has done this in the past with other various things, where there's been civil rights movement in the 60s, for example. Americans came together and they found solutions. So, but education is the first step. You have to know what you're fighting first. And if you're thinking you're fighting the other guy on the other side because he's blue or red, no. What you really need to be fighting is the structural issues in your system and the corruption.
Sure. I just wanted to touch on Bill Gates one more time, because I'm not really sure how well you know about his the ownings of farmland. So basically, what he does is he owns a major huge acres of land and leases out to the farmers.
Yeah,
and possibly these farmers are already not doing well, right? They are, how do I actually put this out? They don't, unlike Bill Gates, who has massive resources, they don't. Only if they happen to yield that much and delivers the KPIs, right? Something of the again, Bill Gates would definitely have something of KPIs. Only then they get to survive. Do you think this is fair for these farmers to be leased out to these lands? Or I'm trying to imagine.
No, I hear what you're saying, right? And it's like, okay, so what are we doing here? Are we growing food, or is it just a business, right? And that's, I think that's what you're getting at. Growing of food, I think, and a lot of people think, and it appears that you probably think this way, shouldn't just be a business. And if we just look at it as a business, then, well, Bill Gates is a rich guy. He's diversifying his investments. He's putting cash into land because it's a long-term investment, a good place to park your money. He can make, X percentage on his money by leasing out the land to the farmers, whatever. It's a business. It's fine. Well, is it a business though, or are we producing food? And if you look at things holistically also, and look at the health of the American public, well, clearly food production, farming is it's got to be a lot more than a business, because when you bring it down to just a business, well, it looks like there's all sorts of unintended or perhaps intended consequences. And one of this is an incredibly unhealthy population, because the food we're producing, while it may be profitable for the food companies and addictive, is that really the right? It's not something just like video games or whatever, right? It's something that's fundamental to us.
In your body.
Yeah. So we're not. It shows the immaturity of our society, where we're at, where we allow things that are sacred to be distilled just down to like business. So, in that sense, is it fair that Bill Gates owns land and rents it out to the farmers? Lots of people own land and they rent it out to farmers. People have been farming for generations decide to lease out their land to their neighbor, right? So there need to be rules around that, perhaps. But ultimately, the solution to this is if farmers have a more direct access to the marketplace and therefore to consumers, and they can manage their margins better, or they have some sort of margin control, then they'll have the wealth to own the land, as opposed to.
So you would still claim, because throughout on the all 200 or some countries that are on planet Earth, a lot of them, like, farming is like the last resort. Nobody wants to be a farmer, at least not out of passion. Just because they don't have any other skill, they go back into farming because it's one of the most oldest job people has been doing. So let's say if I were to enter into farming, or somebody who is watching this video into farming, how do they actually like, farming shouldn't be like their last resort to just survive.
Well,
they should be making wealth. How do they do that?
This is what I mean. We're one of the first few generations that have owned land but are poor. Okay. Now, one really encouraging thing about organic agriculture and the farmers that I'm working with is that their kids are inheriting the farm. Their kids want to inherit the farm because the economic model that organic farmers have created is actually profitable, and so they can generate wealth. So, for me, that's really encouraging. Every time I hear about one of our farmers' kids inheriting the farm, it's like, okay, this is how it should be. So again, though, in order for organic farmers or any farmer to be profitable and create wealth, is I feel they have to have a direct contact to the marketplace as possible. They have to be able to sell as directly to that consumer as possible. And that's essentially how Farmer Direct Co-op was born.
Understood.
And with organic agriculture, which is great, is there's still significant premiums for farmers for organic crops. So as long as those premiums are maintained, the farmers will do well. Now, in order to maintain those premiums, farmers need to cultivate direct access to the marketplace. So I gave you a really good example of the largest standalone organic company in the world. All they sell is organic. So again, they don't sell any conventional grains. Is a group called Organic Valley. They're a cooperative of organic dairy farmers in the U.S. For your U.S. Viewers, they should be familiar with them, especially if they eat organic food. They have a retail brand. I think they're doing about $1.3 billion a year in sales. Because they have a direct relationship to the marketplace, they're not just selling commodity organic milk. They're able to get enough pay price back to their farmers. Essentially, they pay enough for the milk that their farmers are thriving. So, in this cooperative of farmers, you have small farmers. You have small Amish farmers with like 12, 20 cows, milking cows, all the way up to large organic dairies with 1,000 milking cows. The point being, their economic model has worked. It's worked for the small, medium, and large organic farmers, and so they're able to thrive. But it's because, at least for part of their product, they have a direct access to the marketplace. They have their own brand, okay, which is the Organic Valley brand, and then they do private label. Okay, and again, they're dealing directly with the retailers on this. They're not just selling their milk to another brand that will then, sell it on to the retailer, which they do. They have wholesale also, but they have their own brand. They have private label, and then they have the wholesale where they'll sell like powdered milk, butter, other milk solids. I'm not too familiar with all of the different products you get out of the milk from the cow, but essentially, you get butter fat, you get then there's skim milk, powdered milk, things like that. Bottom line is, they aren't just reliant on selling into the wholesale market and taking whatever price that brand or that manufacturer is willing to offer them. They have that direct relationship to the market through their own brand and through the private label. So when farmers structure themselves like that, then again, they're able to control the margin, and they're able to get back a price for their milk, which just makes sense. So every year they can build wealth, and then they can hand the farm down to their kids. Now, when you are growing up on a farm which is profitable, my experience is, and you have a few kids, right? One of those kids will want to take over the farm. Okay, farming is in your blood. It's like what I experience with the farmers I work with is that the farm's in their blood. Most of them, well, all of them, basically grew up on a farm also, and they inherited the farm for the most part. I really, very few, if any, I can think of, got into farming later on in life. It's to buy the land, to buy the machinery, all the knowledge that you need actually growing up in that cultural milieu. It's very, very tough to start just picking up a career in farming. So that's why it's so important that the kids inherit the farm, or at least one of the kids inherits the farm. And again, coming back to this, they only want to do that if it's economically feasible and they can build wealth. If you have that economic feasibility and wealth is being built, farming is a very, very rewarding career, and it's not like the last choice, as you mentioned, right? The reason around the world it's the last choice often is because it's so difficult and farmers are so exploited. But you make it economically feasible, and it's a very rewarding career.
But the only problem with that is it's a general assumption that organic farming yields less. Compared to modern farming, the organic farming it yields less. And if that is actually true, why, like whatever you said is true, why has the industry not shifted yet? Like, what could be the force that's actually keeping farmers locked into synthetic inputs, even when it is killing their soil and also their margins?
Well, in North American context, in grain agriculture, big thing is weeds. Believe it or not, weeds. Farmers, the psychology of weeds and the psychology of selling herbicides. Very, very interesting. These large companies have put millions of dollars into marketing farmers this concept that they have to have absolutely clear fields, just clear, no weeds at all. All right. Organic farmers have broken through that concept. You can have few weeds in your field. And in fact, a lot of the Roundup Ready crops are experiencing weed resistance. So even the conventional farmers now, their weeds are popping up in their fields. Okay, so that's the first thing. It's just psychological. They can't bear to have weeds in their field, like literally. It's hard to explain, right? But I'll try to give you a story here. I met an organic farmer who, believe it or not, used to work for Monsanto, and and so he told me a story and he used to sell herbicides and things like that, and he told me a story how they're invited down to the Monsanto headquarters in St. Louis, and there's this big office tower there, and he said that 2/3 of the office tower, the top two-thirds of the floors, were dedicated to marketing to farmers, just dedicated, to marketing. And something snapped in him, and he realized, well, that's wrong. What are we trying to do? Why is so much spent on marketing? What's wrong here? And he basically concluded that the chemical companies had manufactured this phobia of weeds as one of their strategies to culturally entrench farmers into the chemicals. So that's one reason. Another reason is that nitrogen fertilizer is very effective, but it does have diminishing returns over time. You have to use more and more of it to get the same results. So with organic farming, you have to manage your fertility and build your fertility much more carefully and systematically than just spraying a bunch of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer like the conventional farmers do. So when conventional farmers to go organic, they have to figure out how to farm without using their two biggest tools, which are the synthetic fertilizers and the herbicides.
And can they even attempt to do that? Let's say, because they've been farming with these herbicides and everything for years now, for decades now. So the soil health would be like literally damaged. Like, can they recover? How do they recover? And when can they expect to see some kind of yields to the same level, or at least that would actually sustain them?
Yeah, so if farmers ask me, what I recommend is you want to put your land in a 3-year plow down rotation. So you want to grow something like alfalfa, and put it in rotation for 3 years. And then after the 3 years, then you can put in your first crop. What the alfalfa does is when you plow it under, it fixes nitrogen for one, and when you plow it under, you get a tremendous amount of biomass that goes back into the soil to provide nutrients for future crops. The land's a bit stunned when you don't use these thick fertilizers. One of the reasons is because, as you mentioned, a lot of the microbial life, the microbiome, so all the bacteria and fungi and all the good microorganisms in the soil that give you the fertility die off after so many years
of abuse.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it takes a while to get those microbes back, but they come back. My experience with organic farmers is it really takes about 10 years before they start seeing comparable yields to organic conventional farmers.
So basically, they are stuck right now. Let's say, for example, let's take wheat as an example. So with conventional farming, they are like producing one ton of weeds per, I'm not really sure what's the time frame, like 3 months, 6 months, or maybe let's say a year. For now, let's take 3
Let's say a crop season. So one crop season so basically you're looking at May to September, October-ish.
So yeah, 3 months, right?
Well, that's about 6 months.
Okay, May,
June, July, October. Sorry, May, June, July, August, September, October. So it's roughly 5 to 6 months. So so you're looking about 100 to 120 day crop cycle. So from planting to 4 months, but depending on the weather and when you can get into planting and also when you can get into harvest. So it's anywhere from say, May planting to September, October harvest.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So let's say they are producing like 1 ton in that one particular crop season.
Yeah.
Now, if they switch back to organic, of course, it's imaginable like how much they would be scared. Like, what if they don't come anywhere close? Like,
well, because everyone's also telling them that your yields are going to be off. How are you going to survive this? Blah blah blah. But if you actually look at the economics of it, as an organic farmer, you're not spending all this money on inputs, so your yields may be less, but your cost to grow the crop is a lot less too. So you have to balance that. But ultimately, one of the things in North American agriculture which we've lost is animals in agriculture. So most farms used to be mixed farms, which means they had livestock and grain. But then with the synthetic fertilizers and the herbicides and whatnot, and because of the economics of cattle specifically, they got rid of the animals. So that's ultimately to get your fertility back and to have a farm that's economically resilient. You want to have livestock and crops. That being said, most of our farmers, some of them have livestock, most of them don't. And they're still thriving and doing really well because organic crop prices are very healthy. So, but ultimately, end of the day, when we transition to a much more sustainable form of agriculture, beyond the chemicals, introducing livestock back onto the farms is going to be very important for that fertility.
Yeah. So can you just show me the price comparison between a conventional, for example, I am buying 1 pound of a wheat bag.
Okay.
Organic versus conventional wheat. Like how much, like what's the price difference I'm seeing here?
Well, I'll give you one I'm more familiar with is lentils, for example. Okay. So right now on the Canadian prairies, conventional farmers are getting anywhere from 20 to 30 cents a pound for large green lentils. Okay. We're paying organic farmers $1 a pound. So you're looking at about 3 to 4 times price premium for the farmers. So, right there, that's, it's very profitable for the farmers.
But let's say everyone starts to come into organic farming. So again, the economics comes into picture, that is supply and demand. Now the demand for organic is like way more. Therefore, the price of that would actually go down. Right now, the organic farmers could charge premium because the demand is there and the supply isn't. Let's say, for example, a lot of people watches this podcast and they switch to organic farming. After 10 or 20 or 25 years, the prices of that would go down. It's just today that the prices are, up. So what do they do then? How do they do then? Because there are various kinds of farming techniques. You can also farm inside your house. So again, even that would be like threatening for these farmers, meaning people can, if they just build a tomato farm or just have a few plants around and I'm not really sure the whole lot about the farming, like from seeds to harvest. But when I was like researching for this podcast, I was coming across vertical farming, this farming, that farming, that you can even farm inside the house. So People may most likely farm inside the house too in the future.
Yeah, well, people are going to, I think it's a good idea. All households should grow a little bit of their own food, for all sorts of reasons. One is you can control the environment, you can control your soil. You can exchange your labor for produce as opposed to having to pay for it. There's all sorts of, it's good for the soul to farm, to garden, for all sorts of reasons. But we have to, define what we're dealing with here, though, because oftentimes in the last few years, conventional prices have spiked too. So they've gone as high as organic prices almost. The marketplace can pay for it. So, and also, what is the marketplace paying for? If you start looking at nutritional density, and there's been a lot of studies done on the nutritional density of organically grown food versus conventional food, and it's showing that there's higher vitamins and minerals in the organic food. The more of these studies that are done, the more this is shown and supported. And of course, right, because a lot of people that are ignorant of soil science and farming just think, oh, organic is the same as conventional. There's no difference. But no, that can be farther from the truth. When you grow, essentially food or soil without synthetic fertilizers and poisons, essentially pesticides, you're cultivating the microbiome. So, what organic farmers are really doing is they're growing soil, which then produces nutrient-dense food. In order that plants uptake nutrients, so essentially this is, in simple terms, this is what happens. Through photosynthesis, plants produce sugars, okay? These sugars travel down to the roots of the plants, and then they're exchanged for soil-borne vitamins and minerals with the microorganisms. So the microorganisms take the sugar from the plant roots and exchange for that sugar vitamins and minerals. Okay, if you don't have soil that has all that life in it, all the different communities of microorganisms, you don't get the transfer of nutrients. So when you use synthetic fertilizers and you use herbicides and pesticides, you degrade that microbiome, you degrade that community of microorganisms. So that is why conventional food is showing to have less vitamins and minerals in it than organic food. So,
Okay.
So right there, that's like fundamentally what consumers need to understand. So when you're paying more for organic food, you're paying more for food that has more vitamins and minerals in it. It's not the same thing. Okay. And then, further to that, the body gets ill for a number of reasons, but the main reason the body gets ill is because of vitamin and mineral deficiency.
Yep.
So why does one person get sick and another person doesn't get sick? There's a few reasons. One is, one person may have. Well, healthy diet's one. One reason is people have better, personal sanitation. Okay, that's one. They wash their hands, more in a day, for example. But another reason is that one person is vitamin and mineral deficient, and the other person isn't. So your body can deal with viruses and bacteria if you're not micronutrient deficient. If you're not nutrient deficient, your immune system works properly. It's much stronger. So that when bacteria and viruses are there, they aren't able to get a foothold in your body because you have enough nutrients that your body works properly. A good example of this is just scurvy, for example, right? Lack of vitamin D. People get sick. Vitamin C. People get sick with scurvy. If you have enough vitamin C, you don't get sick. So the body tends to break down when it doesn't have enough vitamins and minerals, like, simply put, right? So the organic food will give you more vitamins and minerals. One of the reasons people are so sick, because there's an abundance of food in our society, but it's a nutrient deplete. So they get enough calories, but they're not getting enough nutrients, therefore they get sick.
Okay. I want you to basically think for a few moments before you actually answer.
Okay.
I have this question. So that is actually conventional farming shows strong yields for the first decade or two. Then soil health degrades and inputs have to increase to maintain the same output. Organic farming builds soil health over time, so yields improve rather than degrade. If you run those two curves over 50 years, which one actually produces more food? Why are we not having this conversation at national level?
So, the reason we're not having conversation on national level is because the universities and the politicians are bought and paid for by the chemical companies. We know this, especially in the U.S. There's a tremendous amount of lobbying going on and campaign contributions from these companies, which the organic community just can't match, which I don't think we should. Adoption of organics is a much slower, but therefore I'd say stronger movement, that it will be because of the people and the marketplace and the consumers, not necessarily because of the politicians. The politicians will follow when they have no choice. So that's one thing. Another thing is that the Rodale Institute has, I think, they're on their 6th decade of side-by-side conventional organic farming trials, and they've shown that over time you do have a yield benefit from organic agriculture. So what they're finding is that, especially in times of extreme weather, so drought, for example, the organic land will yield more, significantly more than the conventional land. Okay, why is this? When you organically manage soil and you increase the microbiome, the life in that soil, you'll have a water retention rate of 20 times conventional soil. So properly managed organic soil will retain upwards of 20 times more water than conventional soil. So during drought years, of course, you're going to have significantly higher yield with the organics. So that's just one example. So over time, yes, they're showing that the organics yields more, plus the economics of it just are exceptional versus conventional farming.
Okay. Okay.
I want to answer one more thing about that question too, right? And we're looking at farming wrong in the conventional point of view. So we're always looking at it like we grow, 100 acres of corn monocrop, and then conventionally, and then you grow 100 acres of corn organically. Well, that's just the wrong way of looking at it. And so in a lot of parts of the world, especially the global south, they're looking at things like agroecology, which is essentially agroforestry. So you're not just growing like, okay, well, you have this hillside of coffee that's growing conventionally, and then you have this hillside of coffee growing organically. Which yields better? That's not the right question. The question is, how are they growing that organically? And it's like, oh, okay, they're not just growing a whole hillside of coffee, right? Trees. They have, multiple different species of trees and different plants and wildlife and diversity on the organic side. So they'll go like, well, you only grew this much coffee. Okay, well, they only grew this much coffee organically, but they also grew bananas. They also grew mangoes. They also had ducks and geese or whatnot, managing, going through the orchard or the forest, managing that. So you have those yields too. Some groups even have like grazing cattle. So, on the organic side, if you take all of that diversity, all of those different crops, all that livestock, then you out yield that, hillside of coffee beans that was grown conventionally. But it's a completely different system of agriculture. It's more labor intensive. it relies on biodiversity as opposed to monocropping. So that's a really important distinction. It's how we look at farming is philosophically completely different. And this gets into things too about the economics of it too, right? Because the reason why we have plantations is it's much easier to manage that from a commodity perspective. A company can come in, it can buy, a whole hillside, it can throw up a plantation, it can then ship out all these, containers of this one commodity to whatever their markets are. Maybe they have a processing facility so they can make it huge. You benefit from economies of scale because they're only putting coffee through that or only putting bananas through that or whatnot. So we need to move away from commodity agriculture. As you move more away from commodity agriculture, then it necessitates having more stakeholders, more farmers, farmer cooperatives, more labor, more biodiversity, diversified markets. When you take agriculture and crops out of a commodity paradigm, it benefits the farmers and the communities versus the corporations.
Understood.
Yeah.
So if you were designing the food system from scratch right now, knowing everything you know about soil science, climate, technology, nutrition, and economics, what would it look like? How different is that from what we have? And what is a single biggest structural change that would get us closest to that design? Number one. And I also have a follow-up question. I would just add it right now. That is, if you could get 30 minutes with the US Secretary of Agriculture and you had to make the single most impactful policy argument you could, what would you say and what specific policy change would you demand?
Oh, well, I don't want to disappoint you, but I wouldn't even bother going to the meeting. The system is so corrupt, and the Secretary of Agriculture is just a figurehead on the top of a corrupt system, that until you have campaign finance reform in the U.S., until the corporations essentially can't buy policy, nothing's going to change. It has to come from the grassroots. So that's saying that.
And that would never happen, I guess. That change would never happen.
No, it has to come from the grassroots, has to come from the consumers. That, the system has to collapse somehow. Americans have to demand different governance. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing it. I'm not even seeing the discussion. What I'm seeing in the U.S. and around the world too is that, unfortunately, still too many people are caught in the Coke and Pepsi paradigm. So these guys are bastards, but our guys aren't. The other side is, well, yeah, your guys are bastards, but our side isn't. The system is corrupt. And until Americans, and again, that's not just Americans.
But I think there's still some light of hope, right? Because recently, alcohol was the big part of North America and around the world as well. But Gen Z are avoiding alcohol, and the alcohol sales are going down around the globe. All Gen Zs are avoiding alcohol. So perhaps because of this sustainable living, healthy diet, the knowledge, the spread of knowledge, eventually, I think in the next 20 years, the conversation around organic farming should also thrive and should be the subject of national importance, I guess, because the kind of food we are ingesting, it's horrible around the globe.
Well, yeah, so I don't want to come off pessimistic. Yeah, there's always hope, and it is changing. The discourse from when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s till now, it's completely different. People know they're being poisoned now, and your generation is making changes. So go back to your question of, what I talked to the Secretary of Agriculture about, right? And, again, I think the biggest, if it could just discuss one policy change for them is subsidies. You have to stop subsidizing commodity agriculture. You have to stop subsidizing corn and soybean, and maybe move subsidies down to the community level, and to subsidies that strengthen the farmer's connection to the consumer. So whether that small to mid-scale processing, whether that's emboldening local food systems, but this is happening anyways. And I think if you just take away the subsidies, if you take away the subsidies, the industry will then start to self-organize on a basis which is profitable. And what that basis is local food production. If it's not competing against large subsidized multinational corporations, will usually win the day out, combined with consumer knowledge. So what I mean by that is that consumers are making the shift. If they value locally produced food, if they value a direct connection with farmers, then that's the food they're going to get. If they don't value that, well, then they're not going to get it, right? Because, why would they want to purchase that if they don't value it, obviously? What's happening in the States is this is starting to happen. There's local food hubs, local food sheds, which are starting to happen. And they have very strict rules. And the rules are that the food sold within these marketplaces have to be locally produced and locally processed. And with things such as coffee, which isn't grown in the U.S., it has to be locally roasted to be sold in these food hubs. So what they're doing is they're bringing the economics, the benefit of the economics, they're localizing it, which I think is very smart. And so if your generation, other generations want to see a change in the food system, that's the change. There are people that are doing it. If that's supported, it will grow. I guess one more thing to kind of align with what you're saying is that food is going from an incredibly industrialized era to a deindustrialized era. Everyone talks about the center store. About 70% of what's in your grocery store is it's the same commodities, just with different colorings and flavorings and stuff like that. You go down the cereal aisle and it's, a lot of refined grains, with tons of sugar in it. It's basically the same crap. And so that's an industrial example of industrial food, and this is why we're getting sick.
And again, that's served as the breakfast. The cereals are recommended as your first meal of the day after you have fasted like 10 hours plus. That's like such a poison, and kids have it most of the time. Like the adults don't eat cereals, right? It's a really poisonous industry that's especially in North America. Again, I can speak for India. We don't have those kind of cereals as our first meal in the of our day. We have a lot of good food, like for example, I come from South India, so therefore we have something called dosa, idli, and you can definitely search like what it is made of. It's made of rice. Therefore, there's fiber. It's a very healthy meal, and we have it with coconut sides, and yeah.
Well, this is, what's happened, right? The refining of grains has been disastrous for people's health. Whenever you have carbohydrates that have no fiber in it, it spikes the insulin in your blood. Your blood insulin levels spike. So, one of the things is we have to put fiber back into our grains. And in fact, we have to start by not taking it out in the first place. So, that's something that needs to be dealt with. I agree with you 100%. Waking up and children eating cereal, so eating something that's high in refined carbohydrates plus very high in sugar, it's a recipe for disaster. And we're seeing this. Combine this with the
obesity and all of that. Yeah.
And when you combine that with the fast food, combine that with all the sugary pops and whatnot, all the candy, all the junk food, and we have a childhood obesity epidemic.
Let me actually ask you a hypothetical question. If the food system does not actually change in the next 5 years, what would the world look like in 2050? Give me an honest and unfiltered projection.
Um, well, people are going to continue to get sicker. Rates of chronic diseases are going to continue to increase. Rates of childhood diseases are going to continue to increase. So, yeah, it's not going to get better. The good news is, though, that the food system is changing slowly but surely. My understanding is that the major food companies, the consumer packaged food companies, are losing market share, a few $1 billion a year. So, we're starting to see that change. It's inevitable because the chronic disease rates are so high. This movement's been going probably for the past 30 years, where people started asking questions about the quality of food and why are we sick, and why are children obese. Why is the general population obese? I think why is it 35 million American are diabetic or pre-diabetic, and that's only going to increase. So, yeah, we're just going to continue to get sicker. It's not like miraculously
get healthier.
Yeah, it's not like the food system doesn't reform itself if it doesn't change. If the quality of food doesn't get better, it's not like people are going to miraculously get healthier. The pharmaceutical companies and the medical community will point to things like increased survival rates of cancer as like that's a good thing, right? As opposed to saying, well, we want to get rid of cancer in the first place. So what's one of the ways to do that? And you improve the food supply. Healthier food, more nutritious food, there'll be less chronic disease.
But there could be an argument made. I'm just being a little bit pessimistic, or at least I'm coming from that end. That is, before the Industrial Revolution, people still lived on Earth, and their food was like really healthy because of traditional farming, and the soil was healthy and all of that. But again, the mortality rate was so high up. But in the present world, after the Industrial Revolution, the mortality rate is so low. People live past 70 years of age, and that's the average around the globe, right? Corporates can definitely make this argument. So how do you balance, how do you view, how do you defend that claim? Because at the end of the day, they had amazing food, but the mortality rate was so high up. We have bad food, but we're still living through.
Yeah, well, I'm not too sure that they had good food and enough good food. That's one thing. Two, food is just one part of it. So what we really started seeing in the Industrial Revolution was tremendous strides in public health. And so, for example, proper sewage systems, clean drinking water, things, things that even as simple as that we take for granted today is doctors wash their hands in between patients.
Yeah.
So there was, I forget his name, but there was a French physician who worked in the maternity wards in Paris. I think the 18s ish. Just let me. I'm going to research this because it's worth.
The founder of penicillin.
No, it's worth knowing. Just give me 1 second here. Yeah, so it was a man named Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis. And what he noticed when he was on the maternity wards in the Paris hospitals that he was at is they had just an atrocious mother mortality rate. I think it was upwards of 50%. So a woman would come into the hospital and give birth, and 50% of them would be dying.
Oh,
And this was around 1847 when he discovered this. And what he noticed was that doctors and medical students were doing things like they're examining, they're doing autopsies. And then after the autopsies, they go give birth. And so he realized that they were the diseases were carrying from the autopsy to the mothers and infecting the mothers. So he mandated that staff scrub their hands with chlorinated lime solution before examining patients, and the mortality rate subsequently plummeted. So it had nothing to do with industrial food. Obviously, it had that, people started to realize that, what the true nature of germs were. And so they instituted, public sanitation, which in this case was the doctors washing the hands. And then deaths from diseases, infections plummeted. Proper sewage systems, proper water treatment systems. This is why people are living longer. It's despite the fact
proper infrastructure.
Yeah. So how I would frame that is like, okay, people are living longer because of public health infrastructure, but they're living longer with chronic disease because of the poor industrial food. Now, how about we get these two things together, which is advances in public health infrastructure and nutrient dense food, and then people can live longer without the chronic diseases.
True. No, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure you should have learned how Kellogg's, and I think even Coca-Cola ran marketing campaigns claiming how their food are healthy despite the high amount of sugar. Like Kellogg's was the worst devil in all of this, where they used doctors' scientific paper, like they created scientific paper claiming how having this as the first meal of the day makes even breakfast. They invented the breakfast as mandatory. I'm pretty sure you know a lot about their marketing tactics. So these corporates can do anything. So this is one of the angles I thought about. So I just thought I'd ask your opinion, how you see this and how you can defend that.
So I'm going to throw out another name for your viewers, for them to research. So the name is Dr. Richard Smith, and he served as editor of the British Medical Journal until 2004. And he's famously stated that the medical research and scientific publishing has become deeply corrupted. He argued that the current system incentivizes fraud, which institutional misconduct reaching a scale where one might need to assume a study is fraudulent until proven otherwise. So that's not me saying this. This is the former editor of the British Medical Journal basically saying that science is bought and paid for. So these studies that you mentioned that the corporations were doing, they're flawed studies. Right. They created studies simply as marketing to try to push a narrative and agenda which would sell their products. So, I wouldn't take much stock in any study which essentially is paid for by food corporation. It's sad, but this is where we are. And again, it's not me. It's not me. There's people within the industry, like this man, Dr. Richard Smith. So, it's very easy if you don't want to acknowledge the truth of something to just dismiss it by calling it a conspiracy theory. But it's not a conspiracy theory. It's proven that a lot of these studies are doctored. So
exactly. No, but the point is, this kind of information the mass public aren't aware about it.
Yeah.
They have no idea about this person. They don't look up whatever is like told to them, or whatever is like told to them multiple times throughout the whole day. They start to believe in it. So
Yep.
I was just like trying to touch upon a tangent, and yeah. Now I really want to ask about John Deere.
Okay,
Yeah,
we
please.
talk about John Deere, but yeah, you just elucidated on something, which is food marketing or marketing in general.
Yeah.
Well, it's just food marketing. Slowly, again, when I was growing up back in the 70s and 80s, few people talked about this, how we're being marketed poison. Now people are talking about this a lot. So there's much more awareness out there. Still, there's a lot of people that aren't aware of it. But slowly but surely, as people get more sick, neighbors start talking to neighbors, family members start talking to family members. The internet is disseminating this information in an incredibly quick pace. It just doesn't happen overnight. But the large consumer packaged goods companies are losing market share. Apparently quite a lot and precipitously, and then eventually you reach critical mass, and the marketplace shifts significantly. So that's happening. How much longer will it take? That's a good question. But it is happening. People are becoming more aware and starting to make better food choices.
If you were to actually farm in a country of your choice, what country would that be? Because of the soil health and every other benefits that you're seeing, like there should be some country that you're like, this is where people need to be farming at, like a dream one.
Well, India's a great place. It's got depending on where in India, it's got a great climate. You can farm all year round. I'm in the northern hemisphere here, so we only farm 5-6 months of the year, at least outside, and so probably somewhere more south, maybe in Latin America, where I could farm year round. And but essentially, people all around the world, they need to eat. So
Yeah.
if you are going to farm anywhere, you want to do so in a way that you can sell directly to the consumer, as at least as directly as possible.
Yeah, and since you mentioned India and touched upon that, are you aware about the situation in Punjab and what kind of critical mass they have reached with their soil health and the water situation for their crop? Are you any remotely aware about that particular situation?
Well, I'm aware of, there was one state in India that mandated organic agriculture, and apparently they're doing very well.
That's actually Northeast.
Yeah.
Assam and all of that. Yeah.
So, again, that's why India is such an interesting place, because there's so much diversity. Something like that can happen. I can't see in the U.S. or Canada where a state or a province would mandate organic agriculture.
Yeah.
I have issues with governments dictating. That tends to not work. I think it works much better if governments incentivize. Again, it seems like in India where they did this, there was a lot of support from the farmers to do this. So I also understand in other parts of India, there's quite high suicide rate. And a lot of that was linked to my specific knowledge is with Roundup Ready cotton, GMO cotton, where they promised the farmers higher yields, better economics, but it tied them into the buying the GMO seed and the chemicals. And after the first few years, the yields dropped precipitously, and farmers got into financial trouble.
Huge debt.
Yeah, and literally, many of them committed suicide by drinking the Roundup. So, it's just another one of those examples in world history that it's just shocking how brutal we are to each other. And the corporations doesn't care. Their job was to get as many farmers as possible hooked to their system of agriculture. And if it worked for the farmers or not, it doesn't matter. We're making money. So I don't know how that's being addressed, if that's still an issue in India. I assume it is. Again, though, that's what happens when farmers aren't working with each other collectively or cooperatively. They're just sitting ducks. As corporations can come along, and the corporations have the governments in their pocket too. So because they can fund that. They can fund. I don't know the specific rules in India. If you can outright fund a corporation, can donate money to a politician's campaign, or if the money comes underneath the table, or if different incentives or somehow favoritism, is managed. But it's corrupt. So if the farmers aren't cooperating with each other, they're just sitting ducks.
I actually wanted to come back to farmer co-op, the program that you are running, and how easy it is to implement around the world. Let's say, for example, the farmers in India and also well, say Indonesia. How easy it is for your system to be implemented and for them to get started from the day one to make from it? Can you just describe more about your product and everything that you're trying to solve?
Are you talking about the mobile app, or what do you?
A farmer direct co-op.
Yeah. So there's lots of organic farmer co-ops around the world. So this definitely is not our idea at all, and a lot of them have a tremendous amount of success. So I just suggest any farmer around the world that's looking at this. They may want to see, are there organic farmer co-ops in their area, especially if they're transitioning to from conventional to organic agriculture. You may want to.
Is there any centralized solution? Let's say, for example, Uber, right?
Yeah.
Uber helps you get a taxi. So, is there a centralized platform or that perhaps these farmers from around the world can, take part in?
Yeah. So we're coming out with a farmer direct organic mobile app. And so what the app, and this is the philosophy of connecting organic farmers directly to consumers. So with the Farmer Direct mobile app, consumer will be able to download the app to their phone and then search to see organic farms within their area. And so they can reach out to the farmer and support them directly. So we're working with a group in Kenya, which is Mount Kenya Organic Farmers Co-op. So their plan is to create a central washing and packing facility that their farmers can bring their crops to, their eggs, their mushrooms, their fruits, their vegetables. The co-op then washes and packs at the facility, and then produces boxes that they then deliver through refrigerated motorized carts directly to households and grocery stores and restaurants in Nairobi. So we're the app, and we're working with them. They're going to implement the app. So that's our way of essentially creating a technological bridge between.
So basically, the end customer can directly communicate with the farmer and purchase from them.
Yeah, through the app.
Using this app.
Yeah, and the app does all sorts of things. The app does once a payment system, so the consumer can pay the farmer, and the farmer gets the money directly. There's a small app fee, but we don't collect the money and pay the farmer. The farmer gets paid directly. We get our app fee.
Just a commission.
Yeah, directly. And so it's almost as simple as that. So it's a payment system. It's also inventory management system for the farmer. So when that consumer buys that product from the farmer, it's the inventory is managed through the app. The farmer gets a printout saying, what was, purchased, but it also will like take that, what was sold off the inventory. So the farmer can keep a running tally
A
of,
log. Yeah.
a log of the inventory. We're also integrating AI into the app, so the farmers can do things like download all their organic documents into the AI, and then when their annual organic inspection comes, then the AI will retrieve all the documents to provide to the inspector. A lot of the administration, a lot of the paperwork that farmers do, which can be time consuming and sometimes a little confusing. We're looking at the app to basically make the administration a lot easier for them, so they can focus on the farming.
Understood.
Yeah.
So an app like this in India, how would it work? For example, let me actually give you some context, because India has like 3 or 4 platforms, that is Swiggy, Instamart, Zepto, and Blinkit.
Okay.
So what these platforms do is the 3 of them does the same thing. That is, they can get you any kind of grocery within 10 minutes to your home, right? Any kind of vegetables, tech products. Like, we don't even use Amazon a lot in India.
Okay.
Unless it's like something like for the size of PlayStation, a refrigerator, something of massive.
Yeah.
Like, you need a trimmer, you need a headphones, you all get from these platforms. So there are organic products also on these platforms, but the only issue is it is not verified. Like, they have that word organic, but we can't verify if it is actually organic and coming from organic sources. So again, India is a huge market for the app that you're developing, right? So if you need to come into India, now that I've given you a context, how do you position your app for the farmers? Because there are a whole lot of farmers who would appreciate something like this, because organic farming is growing rapidly in India. There are many people who are leaving their fancy jobs and jumping into farming, organic farming especially.
Well, another thing the app does for the consumer is it verifies the organic status of the crop. So the farmer has to upload the organic certificate to the app. The consumer can view their organic certificate, but before the farm can be live on the app, they'll send their organic certificate to us. We'll phone the certifier with the certificate number to verify it. So, that's definitely one thing our app does that these other apps won't do. And for organic consumers, that's really important to them, the organic integrity. And, any farmer that's interested in making a direct relationship to the consumer, our app's definitely for them. The issue with the other apps too is they seem to be like a Amazon, a consolidator of organic food and other things. So, like you said, you can buy your headphones from them, you can buy your organic vegetables from them, and it all comes to your door, right? That's convenient. But the problem with the farmer is they give up too much margin with consolidators like that. So for the farmer, they'll make more margin using our app instead of going with the Amazons of the world. Also, too, for organic consumers that really want to focus on legitimate organic crops or food, they'd come to our app. For the consumers that don't really care, they want more convenience. They're not, they're not too up on organic integrity or whatnot. They want to buy their headphones and their toilet paper and everything all at once. So I guess they're going to use the other apps. Now the question is, will food with our app be less expensive than going through the other app? And I'm assuming it would, because we just take a very, very small commission versus those other apps actually taking a distributor markup. So our app definitely lends itself to farms that either do their own packing and delivery, or cooperatives where the farmers would consolidate their vegetables and then the co-op would deliver on the motorized carts. And this is another thing about the app too, and how it could play out in the global south, is through the motorized cart distribution, because it's a lot less expensive than big cargo vans, for example. And it's something that the group in Kenya has identified, which is the kind of gap of like how to actually distribute the food once you've packed it and cleaned it and washed it. How do you actually get it to that end consumer cost effectively? And those motorized carts, refrigerated motorized carts, seem to be the game changer.
Okay. Let me actually ask you. So, what if on a random day the government decides to redirect 10% of its institutional food purchasing toward local organic farmer-owned cooperative supply chains?
Yeah.
What would that actually do to the farm economic at scale with your app around? Like, what would the future of those farmers look like?
Well, there'd be a tremendous amount of success for those farmers. The issue really is just the volume. All right. Once you have a good demand volume, then everything just seems to flow. Right. So if the government really committed to the farmers in that sense, what our app could do for the government too is like each institutional node, like whether hospital or a school, they could order directly through farmers in their local area instead of that purchasing having to go through a centralized government office, which would be very bulky and cumbersome. If the government mandated their institutions that they could buy directly from local farmers through our app, that would really streamline the process and keep costs low.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, if the government would see the wisdom in that, governments, though, tend to like to build bureaucracies. So, if there's some wisdom in it, they wouldn't have to do that. So, more of that, the dollars allocated towards the farmers would actually go to the farmers.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're completely
Okay.
making sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Because it's hard to tell, right? This is a huge subject matter, and
Exactly.
sometimes I don't know if I'm just rambling or if it's making sense, right? So
No.
yeah,
I was just you happen to touch on suicide earlier, right?
yeah,
So there are like continuous questions from that particular answer that I really want to actually wrap up before we are wrapping this session,
okay,
because that point I really wanted to touch on, that is suicide. So far, like there is no other job profession where suicides are rampant, and no matter if it's in North America, India, anywhere else, China, farmers commit a lot of suicide. And there are more stressful jobs like being a pilot, or in the finance world. People, though their job is like more stressful, they don't commit suicide.
yeah.
How do we actually save farmer lives?
Yeah, well, farming has to be profitable. This is the bottom line. The reasons why you're seeing lower suicide rates in other industries that may be deemed more stressful is economics. That airplane pilot, for example, no matter how stressful the job is, he still gets paid every 2 weeks. That financier, that stockbroker, it's a very stressful job, but it tends to make money.
But I'd also like to argue of the fact, like I'm not being dismissive or disrespectful towards farmers, but the point is it could also be a lack of education, right? Meaning, what I'm trying to actually say is these folks, they know how to compound their wealth, investments,
Yeah.
and so on. but the farmers are so into farming. Again, they have all the right intentions. They would say, if I make so and so xx amount by tomorrow, I am going to do this. But even if they commit to do that, things will go wrong because they just don't have the right knowledge. So
Yeah. Well, you absolutely you hit the nail on the head.
yeah,
And that's again where cooperative structures come in, where farmer-owned businesses come in. A lot of the times farmers are making these decisions on their own, without enough input from other groups like a cooperative. The economic options that a lot of farmers have in front of them, just they aren't the good ones. Like, for example, here, grow the GMO Roundup Ready cotton. It's going to yield better. A lot of times they're just making this decision in isolation. They're not talking to other farmers. They're not talking to other cooperatives. There's no other option out there for them except for this, these chemicals. And so,
just fall for the marketing
yeah,
promotional material
yeah,
and make a decision of that.
yeah.
And again,
But
I would just like to.
I also have to say, farmers really need to start thinking beyond just growing the crop and then selling it into a commodity market. They have to start thinking about, well, once the crop is growing, what happens to it? And this,
Yeah,
this is where the cooperative packing and washing house comes in, and cooperative distribution to the end consumer through our app comes in, right? You do that, you're assured a much better price. And so then, you don't run into economic issues, and you don't commit suicide because you don't have that pressure.
yeah. So don't you actually think there should be some kind of institution, or maybe like there are so many NGOs, right, for
Yeah.
various causes. So I believe there should be some kind of either for-profit institution or non-profit institution where these farmers are basically given knowledge, like what kind of decisions to make, and how to reinvest their money to even make more. Like, I really wanted to touch, like, I disagree with one statement that you
Okay.
made. Maybe I could be wrong, but just correct me once you have heard me. That is, farmers especially are the community, one job profession where they are very close knit. uh, they have a lot of people in their circle, a lot of people they talk to, interact with, again, from the from the neighbors to wherever they happen to sell the marketplace. So it's not like they don't have anyone around. It's just the fact that they don't have anyone with the right set of knowledge to actually help them make the right decision, and also allow them to make smart financial moves. What do you say about that?
Yeah, and there's a lot of predatory people out there, right? Telling the farmers things that will benefit themselves and not necessarily the farmers. Whether it's the seed seller, the chemical seller, or the produce distributor. And it depends what type of farming. In India, for example, I understand is a lot of small farms, so you have a lot. Maybe
Yeah.
tighter knit farming communities. It used to be like that in North America, but in Saskatchewan, for example, where we source most of our grains from, there's been a real hollowing out of the rural communities, the farming communities. So where there used to be lots of farmers in a town, now there's not nearly as many as there were before. So, and when there were a lot of farmers in the town, they had formed incredible institutions like the wheat pools, where the farmers basically formed cooperatives and built their own grain elevators to elevate their grain, which basically means to clean the grain and grade it and then ship it out to end buyers. And they had a really good run for about 70 years doing that. So, yeah, it's about the information they're getting, and is anybody actually advocating for the farmers? And that's where the cooperatives come in, essentially. And
Makes sense.
yeah, and I think there's a cooperative movement in India. I'm not totally sure, but my understanding is that there are some farmer cooperatives in India. Is this correct?
I am not really sure about
Okay.
that. I didn't research on that. So I have another question, that is, when does your app launch worldwide,
So
or like in what stages it does?
so our app will be launching in July. So we're going to be beta testing it on a few farms first. So just to be really just realistic, we're probably looking at early 2027 before we launch it worldwide. But if you have farmers in India or a farmers co-op that would be interested in utilizing the app, we're looking for one or two groups in each country to beta test the app, and and once we test all the bugs out of it, then then definitely worldwide. Our hope is that we're in most countries in the world, and working with either individual farms, or farmer cooperatives, or farmer associations, and we hope that it's something that can really bring consumers and farmers together, so we can solve
Yeah.
solve a lot of these issues, because that's the fundamental thing that I see um, to change the food system is connecting farmers to consumers. And the closer we can get that relationship, the um, more farmers will be able to control their margins, and the more consumers will be able to control the quality of the food that they're eating. And you put
Yeah.
those
Just
two things together, and that's really where a lot of things begin to be solved.
Yeah, and how will this platform be governed and regulated? What if this platform becomes like the other ones, where eventually it chases the profit, it becomes for profit, rather than the intent, the good intent is being used to like it's being built with the good intent today.
Yeah.
uh, like, what if tomorrow somebody, the board members, or basically it becomes for profit? Like, how will it be governed, and why should customers in the future, much later on, should still trust into this app? And yeah,
So,
anything on that?
firstly, I'm like, there's no venture capital behind it. It's my company, which is 100% farmer owned. So it's 100% owned by organic farmers. I have a small farm in British Columbia. I'm not a commercial farmer, but we do farm. We grow food for ourselves, essentially. Um, we may one day be commercial. Um, the other investors into our company are certified organic farmers, so it's 100% farmer-owned company to begin with. One, two. I've been down that road before with venture cap. I've sold companies before, and it's just not the route that I want to go in, or that I think I have to go in. As the app becomes more successful, what we're going to do is actually to sell it back to the farmers that are using it. So if we fast forward, say, a decade, what I would like to see happen is that the app is actually owned by 100,000 farmers, and we have a governance structure in place where that control uh, never ends. The farmers just control the app in perpetuity. And so, the thing is, well, why should we trust you? And I think that if I'm, just my own personal, if I want to be greedy, let's just say I want to be greedy, I think I would make more money selling the app to the farmers than selling to one VC.
Yeah.
And then you're going like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, okay. Um, Say our goal is to have 1 million farmers use this app. I think there's something like 120 plus million farmers around the world, right? So if we get, say, a 1% of farmers on this app, and we sold the app to the farmers, that's more money than I'd ever be able to raise with a VC. Now, the question then is, okay, well, what are you going to do with that money? And I'm just going to roll it back into this, basically empowering farmers, around the world through building value-added infrastructure and direct-to-market relationships. And that's like,
Makes sense.
because at a certain point in time, I'm in my 50s, and you're in business long enough, and what money really is, money is a vehicle to allow you to further the mission, as opposed to something where you can just buy nice stuff and consume. At a certain point in time and a certain point in one's maturation, that's just boring, right? Material wealth in that manner becomes redundant. So again, then what do you need the money for? And the money's used to further the mission, because we are in tremendous trouble on this earth, right? Yeah. So in order to get out of that trouble, we need to create different structures and systems. We need to democratize these structures and systems. And so by creating this app and selling it back to the farmers, that's how I feel we can democratize in this case, the food system, if that makes sense to you. So
it does. It completely does, Jason. And I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today. It has been a wonderful chat. You happen to just pour down like everything in one sitting. Again, there's so much we would still love to discover, and we will definitely have another one about the farming industry and everything at a later date. But thank you very much for educating me and also the viewers of this video. What does the farming world look like? What are some challenges? What needs fixing? What you are contributing from your end with this app. So it has been a wonderful session that I had with you, and I look forward to having another one very soon. I think July would be the perfect time to have a chat once you have launched the app as well, I guess.
Yeah, and I'd want to see if you're interested in doing something, because I'd love to come on your podcast again and talk about this, because I look at this, it's a story then, and it's evolving, right? Yeah, so once we launch the app, we'll have a lot more to talk about.